Hi, everybody. This is Ernest here, and this is one of the second episodes of the Beyond Your Report Card podcast. And I have here with me Jodi, and Jodi is an astounding individual. Not only is she an accomplished marine biologist, but she has a lot of accolades that I can't seem to rattle off myself. So, what better way for me to introduce her than to let the woman speak for herself and to introduce herself to you? So, Jodi, say hello to my audience, and how would you introduce yourself to the people that are listening to this podcast today?
Hello, thank you for the very warm welcome, and hello to all your listeners. I love that you've said so many things, but I think the first thing is lots of hats, right? Depending on what I'm doing on any particular day. But as you mentioned, my primary job is actually as a marine scientist. I've been doing that for quite a few years now. I'm also the author of The Element of Play, which is a book, a podcast, and also a course series. So they're probably my main two bits and pieces at the moment. Like I said, I wear lots of hats, depends on the day, whether that's expedition leading with students and teachers and all ages. But most of the time you'll find me either in the water or quite close to it.
Nice. And I do have some very fond memories of me being in the water. And in case you can't catch her accent, she's actually Australian. And about 2 years ago, I've actually been in Australia, especially Queensland area. And I was at this place quite close to Bundaberg, where they actually sell the drink.
Yep.
I think the island is called Heron Island. So I actually dived in that place and it was beautiful. Am I correct?
Yes, Heron Island is one of my absolute favorites, actually. And I've been very lucky. We have a variety of programs over there. So I get to go over every year and have been doing so for about 15 years. But it is one of the most magical places. If you're going to go swimming and diving and snorkeling on a reef, those crystal clear waters, white sand, and just an abundance of wildlife is actually there. So you were very lucky to get to visit that.
Yeah, and I guess one of my core memories and my fondest memories of Heron Island was I was woken up by my in-laws because they were the ones who brought me there to take a look at the sea turtles giving birth. And it was an absolutely magical moment to see these little animals, or not really little, they're quite big actually. I didn't see them crawl all the way up, but just to see how they dug the hole, how they laid their eggs to propagate their generation. And after that, they would slowly pull themselves into the sea. And I even got to touch the eggs, which is something you can't do. But there was a ranger there who went through the eggs and he just explained the whole thing. And he passed me an egg touch. And it was just mind-blowing how I was able to have the National Geographic moment right there and then.
Yeah, it is. That whole area, actually, off Bundaberg, there's quite a few islands like Lady Elliot and Musgrave Island as well. They all are part of the Capricorn Bunker Group. And all through there is really well known for so many turtles. I was actually a turtle tagger for 4 years in that region. So literally every single night I would be up and looking for turtles and tagging them. And if you're lucky enough to be there for you get the adults as the laying of the eggs. And the second part is if you come back like 6 weeks later to 8 weeks later, you'll actually see hundreds of these tiny, tiny little turtles making their way down to the beach. So it is a beautiful experience for anyone who hasn't seen it. And it's a really powerful reminder of nature, right? Of what you can see, what you can experience. And if you know the stats behind it, like 1 in 1,000 of those hatchlings will survive. That's a really low number. And so being a part of that journey is really cool.
And I think this nicely brings into the topic that my podcast is actually going about, and it's about education and the preparation that the education system gives to all of the youth around the world. But I'm focusing particularly in Singapore, and how I'm not sure if you're aware, but the Singapore system is a really high-strung, high-stress system. And I'd just like to speak to your understanding of where you are right now as a marine biologist. You go down into the waters, you take a look at the reefs, and you can see reefs which are pretty identical, similar to our youth these days. And the water is the same, the species the same, similar to the education that is given to all of them. Yet some reefs thrive and some reefs don't, similar to the youths of these days. The same system, some thrive and some don't. So what exactly do you understand about the marine biology of this, and how does it translate into like students' education?
It's an interesting question and a really interesting way to kind of see how we match those two systems, actually.
Yeah.
So if we take a step back and think about coral reefs as a whole. So for starters, coral reefs are a plant and an animal. They are an animal that actually use algae, so a plant that goes inside their system.
Yeah.
And those plants give coral up to 95% of their energy resources. So it's a really big symbiotic relationship. And so it's quite mutual, right? They need each other. But the thing is that there are a lot of stresses that can actually break that bond, in that something happens and the corals actually expel those algae out of their system. They're like, I'm too stressed, I can't deal with it, and that's it. Now, the issue, of course, is when you've reduced your energy, or the things that are giving you energy, by up to 95%, it makes it really, really hard to survive. Now, you can survive, but there has to be something else going on.
Yeah.
And usually that means that the stress is either reduced, in which the different types of algae can actually come back into that coral and they can continue to flourish, but they won't be exactly at the peak that they always were, right? Something had to have changed because they've got rid of their initial energy source.
Yeah.
So that's the first component. Now, what I'd also actually say is that some corals won't survive, right? It's too much of a stress.
Yeah.
And if the stresses aren't removed, they will actually perish in that system in particular. The other thing to keep in mind, that although we talk about identical systems, there are a lot of things at play here. So a lot of it is actually historical as well. And the key component is that resilience aspect. So what is actually being built into the system to keep it resilient? And also, have they had anything that has happened to them prior to these big events? Because without any adequate recovery between systems and between these big events, they will be destined to actually work at a much more minimized level than they would have otherwise.
So it sounds like you are not only describing the marine and the reef like kind of system, but you're actually talking about how humans behave in a kind of system and how do we build resilience in that. So let me just take you to the human side of it. You notice that the reefs are able to display certain kind of resilience if they undergo, or they have certain kind of, like, what is a word that you can help me in this? How do they establish the resilience in them? And can we see the same thing when it comes to the youth? How do we build that resilience in the youth? And is it possible to do it for the reef itself? So I'm helping the youth and the teachers, who are usually my audience, understand.
Yeah. So I think the first thing that's really important to recognize is that it's any form of stress. So if we talk about reef, we talk about a lot of heat stress, right? Bleaching events, etc., because that's one of the things that people can most readily recognize and understand. Now, a bleaching event can occur because of heat, but it can also be that there's too much salt in the system. There's not enough salt in the system, as in too much rain. It's too cold, it's too hot. There's so many things that go on that can actually create a stress. You've got too much nutrients in there, so the corals can die. The reason I say that is it's really important that it's not one stress that is creating this. It can actually be layered stress. Human impact, for example, when there's rain, there's actually often more rubbish, and those rubbish can actually go on top of the corals, and it can create, a whole problem in itself. So there's a wide array of stress that occurs on a reef. Now, if we talk about students, same kind of thing happens. We don't actually know everybody's individual experiences that have led up to where they are now. And also, each individual person has different stress levels of acceptance as well, right? What you find stressful, I might not, but vice versa. So it's really important to take that into account, because actually when you're creating such a high intensity, high productivity lifestyle, if we're talking about students in particular in your area, then where is the time to recover? And if we look at it from a marine science perspective, we have something called the shifting baselines concept. And so the shifting baseline is, today, if I looked at something today, it looks great, right? And I go, wow, look how amazing this is. If I don't have context of what has happened prior to now, today is exactly where I think it is. So in 100 years, if somebody comes in and goes, wow, isn't this brilliant? But they don't have the context of where we are now either. It's really important to understand that a shifting baseline is important for two reasons. One we'll come into a little bit later. But the second reason is actually because it also relates to reduced resilience. So if you don't have time to recover between any of these stressful events, your actual resilience is dropped over time. And therefore, down the future, you don't actually have these peak performance, because actually it's had to reduce as we go along.
So you said something really interesting, that you have to build in some kind of breaks in order to build the resilience. Is this why, and I think I'm leading into your book and also your podcast, this is why you added in, or you have actually started this whole elements of play book workshops and probably even the business and the things that you're doing in the podcast to help people understand that, look, you have to enjoy yourself. And when you enjoy yourself, you are going to naturally build resilience. And it's a great way of doing so. Or am I
Yeah.
leading the way? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, a lot of that is correct. So the thing is, like, as you mentioned at the very beginning, I've worked with hundreds of students, and that's over on international expeditions in particular. Now, to set the scene, it's usually 3 weeks in another country with no phones, no social media devices. The only camera they can have is a point and shoot. They can't have a phone at all. They have no teachers with them. So it's usually a group of between 20 and 30 students and 3 leaders, which is myself and 2 teachers, right? That's it. Now, for 3 weeks, we will be doing a variety of things. It's usually got a hike, which goes for about 7 days. We've got a community project for about 7 days and about 7 days of sightseeing. Now, at the best of times, sounds like an adventure, right? I could think of nothing better than to not have to be on a phone for 3 weeks. I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
But you can imagine how stressful that can become for students really, really quickly. And so how can it's been really interesting watching these groups of people. What happens, you can almost set it to a clock. What happens in week 1, which versus what happens in week 2 and what happens in week 3. And part of that is all about resilience building. So you're putting them in stressful situations on purpose. But what I think is really important here is that I call it failing forward. You want to make sure that people can make mistakes in a safe enough environment to recognize that you can help them out if worst comes to worst, but you don't want to have that safety blanket so close to them all the time that they never fail, because actually you reduce the resilience, especially from a human perspective. If somebody has never failed, imagine what that does when you finally do fail, right?
Yeah.
It can be really devastating. So how can you fail safely? How can you fail in a way that actually builds you up, doesn't actually put more pressure on you? And like most people these days talk about burnout. It is such, I'm busy. Everybody's busy, right? Yeah, we are. So how do we change the terminology? And from a student's perspective, like, how do we build in those elements that they can actually feel human and not the entire force of the world around them? And I just found that especially with students and with groups of individuals, especially in the workforce and field work and all these things, mate, the first thing that happens is you need to be a little bit playful, because if you can make people smile or laugh, they immediately stop reacting to what is going on around them and instead actually enjoying things. And that's integral in learning, in neuroplasticity. It's the quickest way we learn is by adding play into it. So it's actually, it's not frivolous. It's very important for students to understand what play is, and also to build resilience, to build creativity, etc. as well.
So I think you've spoken about something that I feel a lot of the audience I have might actually push back. And I'm talking about my educator audience right now. It's like, wow, you're talking about play. Does that mean I have to increase the amount of time that I have to allocate for playing? Or because most of the time when you think of play, it's about playing during recess. They go for a break, they head down to the cafeteria, the canteen, and they're given a wide open field with a couple of sports equipment. And that 30 in Singapore is only 30 minutes. I don't know about Australia. Within a time span of 6 hours in school, they only get a 30-minute break. Do you think that is sufficient, or do you believe that there is another way to integrate play in a meaningful manner?
Look, I think that you can actually integrate play into every single day with just really small things. And I want to be really clear, because I think when you say the word play, as you mentioned, lots of people are like, oh, that's frivolous, it's childish, it's all these things. But as I already mentioned, it actually increases productivity by allowing the brain to stop focusing for just 1 second. It actually allows problem solving to develop much quicker, creativity, etc. as well. And it can start with something as simple as 5 minutes, right? Or put on when you get home, put on your favorite song, listen to it, dance around, see what that does to your body. It creates an element of lightness throughout it. And those things are really simple. I also think it's really important that when we phrase these things, a lot of people can say, oh, play is a waste of time. Right. The word waste, when I talk about time, I always talk about it as being investments. So to me, if I was to invest that half an hour in play, that's unstructured, right? The whole point is allow people to be bored, to explore, to be curious. Because when you structure everything so much, you actually build out any of those key components. And actually, yes, a structured system is great for creating identical humans and hopefully getting them all to a particular level, but it also pushes out that creativity, that curiosity, that natural problem solving that occurs if you have time and space to do so.
Yeah. So I think it's really nice that you pointed out that these are really great possibilities. And I would like to maybe tell you how my business actually runs and how I do my activities and my workshops. Play is really built in. We come up and we concoct up activities that we instruct the participants to use. And one thing that I've discovered is they discover themselves when they interact, when they make certain decisions, when they build certain things. There is this not only self-understanding, but it's also understanding of the people they work with. And there are many learning objectives that can come about that. Do you feel that this is how avenues or schools can layer in play to make it not only workable, but also achieving certain outcomes?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing is, you can add play into just about anything that you do, right? And it's also, again, addressing what play means to you as an individual and as a community or a structure, because I think that's really key. Because as you mentioned, people can push back on it. Oh, play's just, it's soft. Like, why would we do that? But actually understanding what play means to you and in what context as well. So in a relationship, it's very different to a friends and family group compared to a workforce, compared to a school. So in school, 100%, there's so many little activities that you can do. And some people would say like icebreakers, right? Some are way better than others.
Yeah.
But the whole point of an icebreaker is that it breaks the ice of a room. So if you integrate some of those little kind of components, again, there's always a goal underneath. It's usually hidden, so students don't necessarily know what it is, right? It's usually got things to do with like communication or problem solving or team activities or teamwork. And if you as an educator stand back and watch some of this happen, you can really quickly understand the dynamics in a group. And then you can start to understand what students might need, because everybody needs something different. And if you're working as a team, you know which ones will step up as a leader and which ones won't, and therefore what roles you might be able to give them. So it's a role reversal, so you can kind of help develop those unknown skills. And that's what I think is really important. If you want to put a teacher hat on or a principal hat on, actually using play with an understanding that it helps with behavior and it helps with socializing and understanding communication skills, I think it's actually integral, right? It's not frivolous. Actually, it's very beneficial for everything that you're trying to achieve as a teacher.
So I think I completely resonate with you. And one of the things I used to do, because I used to teach PE, physical education, was that I would always begin my lesson by giving my students the free play. There are a couple of reasons why I do so. First and foremost, I wanted to warm up their bodies, because before you do a physical activity, you have to get the bodies warmed up, the muscles warmed up. But more importantly, as I stand back and I watch what my students were doing, some would pick up certain equipment, some would play other kinds of equipment, some do it alone, and some refuses to participate at all and sit out. Those were the ones, and they were the signals as to, wow, I am feeling lonely, I don't feel part of the group. And that's when I would spend that, I would not be bothered by anything. I would just walk over and just talk to him or her. And those are really, really great interactions with them, because I understand them better. So do you think that the school system is able to structure some of these play matters in, not only overcome and build in the resilience that you spoke about? And how do they go about it? What do you recommend?
Yeah, look, I do think that particular schools, and I would like to say it's not just for Singapore, but there is certainly some very high achieving schools throughout the world, right? That really structure so much into their students' days. I've worked with quite a few schools within Australia, and I just remember these girls in particular going, right, I'm up really early before everyone else because I've got training. Like they were, I don't know, they were boating. They go to training and then they go to class early so that they can study, and then they do a full day of work, and then they go to the library again to study, and then they have extracurricular activities at night, and then they do something else. They go to a part-time job, and they're getting like 5 or 6 hours sleep a night.
Wow.
And it's like, you guys are in year like 10, 11, 12. Like this to me is crazy, which is very different again to what I did as a student at that age. And speaking to them, the overall expectations are much higher. You need all of these extra things to get into a good school or university, etc. The expectation to perform is much higher because it's a well-performing school. There's a myriad of things that they can put on themselves, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what's really important, that all of these systems we're building, they're so structured that it gets really, really hectic. And I think that you need to allow play. And I find it really hard to say we should structure some more in, right? Because it's like an oxymoron. We don't want to structure the play into it. That's not what it is. But I think we need to allow autonomy, right? We need to allow students to make decisions. So if you're stuck for time in the school system as it is, where are the pockets that you can invest that time wisely, even if it's 5 or 10, 15 minutes, right? We're saying we're already pretty packed, then use what we have. How do we build it in? Because if you're genuinely interested in increasing productivity over time, it's not about structuring more stuff. It's about adding more space around it to let people learn who they are and what they want to become, and those really integral skills as an adult that I feel that we don't allow time as a student to do anymore.
Nice. And I think having this white space is something that, unfortunately, at least for the Singapore system, I can speak from experience because I've actually been in the middle management before. It's something we find really difficult. But I like how you use the word invest and to find those pockets of space to actually build in the time for people to discover themselves, to understand themselves, to interact, and most importantly, to build up all of those things, which I feel is quite lacking these days, especially since you and I know artificial intelligence is taking off a lot of things that we used to be able to do as humans.
Yeah. I mean, I keep saying I think we're becoming very good at human doings rather than human beings now, right? It's really easy to ask. And like, as we've said, we use AI.
Yeah.
But does that take away so much of the creativity? I mean, it potentially it does take a little bit away from us. Is it adding more? I think if we can use it really wisely, it's a really great tool. But I always think instead of being the first point of call, like give it a go first, right? What are your thoughts? Don't ask what AI thinks. What are your thoughts? And then say, hey, this is what I've been thinking. Because I think if you start going straight to AI, then actually you start removing your own thoughts from it, and slowly but surely, you don't have that diversity. And it's diversity of thought. It's willingness to have tough conversations. But I think it's curiosity is key. And that's in everything, getting to know people, because actually the best relationships moving forward for any business and for school students thinking about moving into businesses, you need to know how to communicate. And I think in a digital age, we start to lose that, which is why these expeditions were so good, because they had to talk to each other. There was no music, there was no phones, there was no nothing. You had to converse and find out more about each other.
And I think finding out about each other is really important. So Jodi, I'd like to ask you something probably a little off tangent right now, because I think it's quite important. Some of my audience might actually feel very burnt out. And I would like you to not look at it from a school perspective. What exactly are some of the things that, as an individual, maybe the student themselves or the parents of these kids, what do you think they can do to help these youth get out of the rut? Because I think this plays right up to your expertise.
It's interesting. So I do want to preface this by saying I remember, and it was only when we were discussing some questions earlier, I was like, I remember being in year 7 and I was always an overachiever. And my year 7 student, actually, my year 7 teacher had written on one of my projects, like A+++, right? It was big. And she's like, just so you know, if you continue at this level, you will burn out. And I remember for a teacher to have written that, right? And I was like, fast forward 20 years. Yeah, you were correct. Look at that. All these overachieving people seem to burn out at one point in time, if not multiple times, if you haven't assessed the issue. And I think some of the signs are really not necessarily as clear as they could be, right? But for me, everything that I've seen with people and talking to people about burnout and tiredness, they're actually quite different. So you can be exhausted, you can be tired, but that's usually a body system kind of component, right? Maybe you've been at the gym, you've been doing lots of things, like recognize it for what it is, or packing too many things in. But burnout seems to be more along the lines of like, you just don't feel alive. Like what happened to me is if I go, feel like I'm on that Groundhog Day again, right? Like nothing brings you joy anymore. You're just going through the motions because you feel like, is this all there is? When you stop losing, or if you've lost your spark, that's, to me, is immediately you can determine that's burnout. Like if nothing, that you don't want to do anything, you don't have motivation to do anything, you're just like, that's it. Something's going on internally and you need to change it. All right. So it doesn't matter what that change is, but you need to change it. So often the first thing that you can do, it's not taking a nap or anything, it's remove yourself from the environment that you're in. So if it's all day on computers, go outside. If you've got a park, go and sit on the park, take your shoes off, sit in nature. Do not look at your phone. 5 minutes, take a breath, take 3 breaths, like notice what happens in your system. And if you feel even a tiny bit lighter, like you can take a big breath and kind of like feel it, that's a really good sign that you know there's a tiny step forward, because you need to find the clues. It's not about doing 1,000 different things in one. It's about going, I'm not okay. What's one thing I can do? Because if you ask anyone who's, pushed to the limits, their cup is overflowing with things that they've had to do, their calendar's maxed out. If you go, oh yeah, you just need to take time, just rest once you've done all this. That's not what fixes it.
So I love how you actually said, first and foremost, you have to recognize, understand yourself. And if you lose the spark, and I'm sure a lot of us have actually lost that spark before, and I know I have also, the first thing that you do is you just get yourself out of that situation, get out, find something else. And when you realize that you're feeling a little lighter, then it is a sure sign, look, you're on the right path, and you continue down that. And I really appreciate the nugget that you have given. So Jodi, we have come to the tail end of this particular podcast interview that I have. Before we go off, I've always asked this same question to all of those I'm interviewing. If there is one thing that you could pass, a timeless principle, to a young person right now, what exactly is that one timeless principle that you can actually value at?
I would say take the very wise words from Dolly Parton, actually, and it is, find out who you really are and do it on purpose. Because it just takes we spend so much time living up to everybody else's expectations and trying to fill the boxes and all these other things and trying to work out everything in life. But once you find out who you are, it might not fit in the box that everyone expects it to, and that might be exactly where you need to go.
So understand yourself and find out who you are. Don't try to fit into someone else's checkbox. And most importantly, I guess you're saying, don't be a circle in a square peg hole. Am I right?
100%. Love that.
Okay, awesome. You can probably quote me for that next time. So Jodi, before I close off this particular podcast, can I just ask if you have anything that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, look, if you're interested in learning more about play and how that plays out in your workforce or your relationships or anything, just in your family, or maybe it's just you and you want to do one more thing, just something to increase that lightness, head on over. I've got a website. It's called theelementofplay.com. There's also a podcast, and you can find me on all the socials as well.
For sure. And we will definitely have all of those links right down in the description box below. So don't worry if you miss all that she has said. It will always be found right there. And if today added value to you, and you would love to hear more of such podcasts, please click the subscribe button. Please like this and do leave some comments so that we can actually get back to you or to answer any burning questions you have. And thank you once again, Jodi, for being on this podcast. And we're going to see all of the audience in the next one. Bye.
See ya.